So, hello and welcome back to the next episode. Hello and welcome back to the next episode of the Self-Development with Tactics podcast with your host, as always, Christopher Walch. Walch, actually, so Walch. And like always, or quite always, we are going ahead with another book summary. So we're actually going ahead and we're not starting one, which was basically something that's quite new because in the last few episodes I actually always started a new one. Maybe I just think about it like this, or maybe it just feels like this for me, because I actually do have recorded for Friday. So today I actually have to record 2 episodes, the same thing as yesterday, I think, or the day before. I don't know. Maybe it was Wednesday. I don't know. I think it was yesterday actually. So I don't know. Nevertheless, we are going ahead with Propaganda by Edward Bernays, which is, I think, quite an interesting book in general, but I do think the summary there isn't maybe as good as it could be, but I don't know. I really don't know. It's a little bit, first of all, complicated for me, actually, this book. It's definitely not something that everybody will understand from the first, point on quite, but it's still a pretty fucking great book, I would say, or at least book summary with a lot of great informations. And I do think that it really shows a lot about communication and psychology and all those things. And I'm quite seeing right now, it might be the case that the video of mine might be a little bit delayed or might be a little bit blurry. I think blurry is a quite great word. And I do have seen that this summary isn't that long anymore, so it could probably be like, okay, me actually going to something else afterwards and maybe actually starting something else afterwards, which is could totally be the thing, but I don't know. But let's see. So how politicians use propaganda. Imagine that a politician wants to lower tariff, whatever tariff is, with double F. The poor way of swaying the public would be to tell people to vote for him because he will love lower tariffs and that decreased prices for everyone. This is how a proper propagandist would approach the issue instead. And I do, before I actually read it, you haven't seen it. Before I'm actually going ahead and with there might be in it, I think he's actually going to talk about, the propagandist, is actually not going towards or to the people directly, but he will totally just go to another person that is just these people's leader, some sort of these people's thought leader, could also be the thing. So just the influencers, quite. And I just still find it quite interesting and quite powerful that he actually mentioned quite influencers. I think he actually said influencers. I don't remember quite. And it was great to see, that there is a background of influencer and using influencers. So it's definitely not something new. And this pretty much shows me that the funny thing, which I kind of see, is that the old things, like all the vintage things, they come and they go, or they came and then they were gone and they came again. You can totally see all these vintage cameras, these vintage gear in general. A lot of vintage stuff is outside there. Quite nowadays, it's pretty a new product, I would say. And for me, it's pretty new. It's definitely not the newest thing or the newest trend. But it's definitely something that's more trendy than, I don't know, balloons. Fucked up example, I know. But I think you get what I mean. And you can totally see that this is actually the thing that is always the case. Actually, in terms of the influencer marketing was actually also done by propagandists in, I don't know, when the Nazi were quite living, if you can say it like this. Or if there were other propagandists, they actually have used teachers and or other public kind of preachers to actually spread their message and to actually just really brainwash everybody. And they just used those influencers the same way as we are using influencers right now as a marketing way or as a marketing product or marketing concept, strategy, whatever. And it works, I would say. And this is just funny. So yeah, the first thing is, don't tell people low tariff are good, but create conditions that make his point dramatic and self-evident. The second one is, stage a low tariff exhibition. I do really have tariff. What the fuck? The reduction of trade reduction of trade barriers and important tariffs, tax, duty, toll, excess, levy, assessment, imposition, impost, charge, rate, fee, taxation, tariffs, customs, duties, dues. Make certain that you understand the tariff for coals, prices, whatsoever. So it seems to be the reduction of trade barriers and import tariffs. It is actually always quite great if you're just searching for a word and this word is actually explained with the exact same fucking word. Yeah, it seems to be some kind of a tax. Could it be like it is? Could it be that? I don't know. They say tax as well. I'm just thinking like it's a tax. Okay? Maybe this will make it a little bit easier for myself as well. I don't know. So the second one is, stage a low tariff exhibition simultaneously in 20 cities. Have prominent men and women to open the exhibitions. Organize groups whose interests are especially affected by the high cost of living to spread the word. Dramatize the issue. Have prominent men boycott woolen clothes and go to important functions in cotton suits until their wool import fee was reduced. And let social workers speak on how the high cost of wool engages the health of the poor in winter. I basically didn't understand anything, to be really honest, but I do hope you have understood everything. But this is the whole thing. It might be like I'm not understanding it. This is quite shitty as well, but it's not that bad. Unless, or at least, the one of the most important things for me is that you get something out of it. It's not about me here, it's about you here. And I'm not doing it because I just, want to learn myself, which is actually, to be honest, also a reason why I think I've chosen this thing to do, and I'm sorry for not showing you the thing. There actually, to just talk a little bit, there are quite a lot of ways and a lot of reasons why I actually started the podcast in this topic and whatsoever. First of all, which was, I think, one of the most important things for me, was that I'm actually doing it in English. Why in English if I'm actually having German as a mother tongue? Because I think English is a very important language, and it's definitely good to be able to speak it quite fluently and quite in a good way. And therefore I just thought like, okay, I've already been quite good at talking in English, not talking English, but English in general. Talking in English, at my point of view, or talking any foreign language, at my point of view, is definitely something completely different. You can write and you can just listen to people and understand these people, but speaking in a fluent way with just, changing situations, like I'm here, I pretty much have to adapt to what I'm reading. It's definitely not something that's too easy for maybe someone who isn't that good at speaking in English. But also a reason was why I actually have chosen this kind of niche, even though it is just a really fucked up niche. And I don't know, I think I would never ever just suggest someone to go into this exact same niche as I am. So the self-development and motivation and whatever it is, business, personal thing. Even though I do have to say, having a personal brand is something important. And I do quite feel like, it doesn't quite matter what you're talking about. There will always be someone watching you. And the good thing then is that you're actually building a personal brand and that people actually trust in you. And I think this is one of the most important facts. They have trust in what you're saying and what you're doing. Because you are a brand, because you're established, and especially if you have an audience and whatsoever, people will trust you. And people will trust you also in another way. If you might be like, okay, I don't want to stay in a self-development range, or I want to just expand what I'm doing, then at my point of view, there will be people who will just still trust me. And I think this is a great way to just go into maybe the corporate world or just establish something for yourself, which is also one reason why I started this, because I felt like, having this as a work or just living from doing the podcast and doing the blogs, the posts and whatsoever, definitely is a great way to live, isn't it? Besides that, it also gives me just a really great start. Building my personal brand, being known, and all these great things just can lead to a great success at my point of view. This was also one reason. Another reason why self-development, because it helps me. I learn a lot. I can basically do quite everything if it's marketing practically. The thing is practically or theoretically, practically actually not. Because if you're talking about self-development and you're just doing about, you can, the thing is you can always put it like in a way you just want it to be, just saying like, okay, self-development has also something to do with marketing, because nowadays everybody has to market, and this is something you develop, and this is something you maybe aren't good at quite now, which means that yourself isn't good at it, and therefore you're just self-developing the skill of marketing. You can put it like this. Some kind of theoretically you can do it. I do not know if this is actually, the best thing to do, but yeah, so they're actually quite a great way, or quite a few whys actually, why I've pretty much started this journey, and also because I quite believe in it. And why I actually believe in it, and one of the most important things for me actually was something that I really quite understood or recognized pretty lately. And it was actually an old episode of Gary Vee's wine show he did for his older channel, or for his older business, which was actually a wine store in New Jersey, I think, and whatsoever. And he was talking about wine. Every single episode, I think it was over 1,000 episodes, every single one was about wine. Only about wine. He was only just talking about wine, tasting and saying if it's actually good or if it's not good. The thing is, I've been listening to one of his episodes, and they're not boring, and I just definitely not the target audience of this certain content, because I'm definitely not interested in wine, but it some kind of wasn't that bad. And people actually watched it, and he had, back in the days, 1 million followers on Twitter, which is incredible. And you can really see, okay, the production value or volume or quality or whatever it is, the volume has to be big, but the quality is definitely something subjective, and some people will definitely be like, okay, this is quite fine if it's like this, even though you might be like, this is total shit that I'm putting out there. But, all the people have a subjective opinion on what is quality, but quantity is definitely something that a lot of people, that's kind of non-debatable. It is to some way, but I think if you're just putting out 10 videos on one single day, people will totally be like, okay, this is quantity and this is volume and this is big volume. But yes, I do think and I do hope that you can find that you can find for yourself also something that you can say, okay, this is helping me and this is developing me and other people at the exact same time on such a big scale. Then I've just established it quite for me. The problem that would be maybe like that I'm actually not catching on or whatsoever, but I do think it only just takes a lot of time. It really has to be, or you really have to be patient if you're just willing to be an influencer or doing just the same thing as I'm doing. You quite have to be just, first of all, hardworking. This is something I've always thought, like, all these YouTubers have a very great job and they just do not have to do anything. But it's not the case. They quite have to do a lot of things, and people actually quite underestimate it. And maybe I've as well, but I'm prepared quite good. So I do have the discipline. I'm still doing the shit every single day. Maybe we'll just adapt someday when I'm thinking like, okay, I want to put some time of mine actually in something else rather than what I'm doing right now, which is totally okay as well. Doing the 80-20 rule, putting 80% into one business and 20% of your time into another one, and seeing, if it is actually fulfilling you or whatsoever, why not? Yeah, basically by the time the propagandist is making the appeal, the public is already primed and willing to accept his message. And I totally like the word primed. And I do not know if you know the word primed, but it basically means that they receive quite a message, and through this message they can't think in a different way. Which means, like, if somebody comes up to me and is like, okay, this movie is total shit, please don't watch it. And you're still going to the movie, and you are primed already. You have an opinion, or you got an opinion from someone before. And you will never be like, you totally don't know what you should think about this film or this movie, because somebody actually already told you his or her opinion. And this is then a problem, because you do not have an objective view on a certain product or on this certain thing that you're going to watch, because you have the opinion of others. And I do hope this just comes around or comes across like I wanted to, and I do hope that you understand what I'm actually meaning. But yeah. Technocratic government. Propaganda ends with what looks a lot like an endorsement for a technocratic government that governs the masses with propaganda. Basically, propaganda in Bernays' view becomes a way for the enlightened elite to channel the not so enlightened masses in the right direction. I couldn't agree more. Our task now, and I count on you to help there, is to make sure that those elites are indeed enlightened. And that's one of the pillars of the power moves. We need fundamentally good people who know how to be bad to reach the elites of power. Well, and this is basically it with the summary itself. I'm quite a little, to be honest, I'm quite a little bit feeling not that good about this book. It's for me, it's like, there wasn't that much in it. And maybe it's just because I didn't understand maybe 70% of it. Especially in the last few things, I do not know what he's talking about. But I also think that, me being able to actually just understand it and whatsoever will just take way too much time, and I'm not going to quite, waste it maybe. But yeah, the cons of the book. As much as I love Propaganda by Edward Bernays, there are quite a few cons you should be aware of. The first one is simplistic sociological view of invisible people. And invisible people is quote unquote, by the way. Propaganda talks about the invisible people with power as if they were a homogeneous group with shared interest. But they are not. Sure, some interest might coincide? Is it coincide? It is like coin and then CIDE, like keeping taxes for the rich low or providing a way to escape them. But there are plenty of issues where the rich and powerful stand on opposing grounds. And that's definitely true. I do just really have to agree with the author there. I do not know what Bernays was talking about there, so because I think this is actually not something that was in the summary itself. But actually, yeah, there are some ways that, just, rich are able to just have a lower tax because of maybe their business, or maybe because they have certain abilities through their money and through their wealth that others quite do not have. But it could also totally be the other side of the coin. For example, which is some kind of a mediocre example, might not be that good of an example. We in Austria have certain tax levels, I would say. And there's one you have for your wage, actually. And there's one you have to pay 25%, then it's 35%, then I think it's 40% or something, and then it's 55% of your whole wage you have to just pay as a tax. The thing is, you only just pay what is actually in this kind of an area. The last one is, so the 55% is from 1 million on, so 1 million in a year wage, or just earnings or income or whatever you want to talk about. The thing is, if you're earning 1,100,000, so 6.1 million quite, you only have to just pay tax for this 100,000 euros or dollars or whatever. But still, you do just have to say the more you earn, the more you also have to pay. So therefore, it's quite the opposite. The richest have more and have to give more. The people who actually do not have anything might actually do not have to give anything, because there's actually a pretty low level where you just have to pay 0% of your income as a tax. But there are plenty of issues where the rich and powerful stand on opposing grounds. Unscientific, random claims dressed as obvious truths. Talking about the few people who direct the propaganda, Edward Bernays writes, but it is well known that many of these leaders are themselves led, sometimes by persons whose names are known to few. Have you noticed what any critical reviewer could object there? It's his statement of it is well known. This is the same format you find in Think and Grow Rich, by the way. Maybe this was actually one of the reasons why I didn't like Think and Grow Rich that much. Vogue and psychology details. Vogue on psychology details. Propaganda makes some big claim of how people exercise little will and instead obey orders of the marketers and PR barons. And it also goes in details on how the propaganda is prepared. Yet, it's rather light on the details of how this process occurs from the common people's mind, which might actually be a pro since he would have come up with some unscientific claim anyway. Yeah, then the pros of the book are, first one is I love propaganda. Among the pros, big claims but also awareness of the limitations. I highly appreciate how the author is fully aware and clearly communicates that propaganda is not an exact science, and he says scientific accuracy of results is not to be expected because many of the elements of the situation must always be beyond his control. Propaganda, like economics and sociology, can never be an exact science for the reason that its subject matter, like theirs, deals with human beings. Intelligent analysis. I repeat myself, but Bernays was so ahead of his time that he is still ahead of many modern, and he was definitely some kind of a communication expert. Deep evergreen propaganda principles. Some principles like ditching facts for propaganda are a timeless constant that worked 100 years ago as much as they will work in 101,000 years, which definitely is the case. If you're just ditching facts, which I think is, let's look it up. Thank you. I think I know just what he means, but just quite not saying the truth, isn't it? And if you're just being like, okay, the facts aren't true and the facts are actually not what the scientific standpoint says or some shit like this, you can definitely just pursue a lot of people or something that's quite not actually the truth, isn't it? Technocratic government propaganda for good. You might agree or not agree with it, but I wholeheartedly agree that democracy is far from the best government and can even be dangerous. And that's actually true. And there was a saying, I do not quite remember it, but it's like, so there is quite not something better than democracy. That's the reason why we actually took democracy. So it's not pretty good and it's not pretty shitty, but it is definitely not the best you can do or the best system you can have. But it is the system that's quite working, I would say. I don't know. Propaganda can be used for good or for evil, and most of the time I would even say that it's quite used for the evil. Even though I'm just thinking about it, and this was also one of the reasons why I've actually taken this book, that I actually can maybe implement one of his tactics or whatever in my social media strategy or whatsoever, for a good sake, to actually just, bring love to the people and bring good, at my point of view at least, good insights and mindsets and, rules and whatever you want to call them to them. Yeah. And what we need is an enlightened leadership that uses propaganda for the best interest of humankind. Yeah, this makes sense. Propaganda review. Propaganda was written in 1928 in the period when the social sciences were at their infancy. Hence, propaganda is not a scientific text, but a text of conjectures and personal opinions. Yes, Edward Louis Bernays provides something that goes never out of style and keeps working even when there is no scientific evidence or when scientific evidence is scarcely or poor. An intelligent mind to analyze the status quo and the social dynamics. Some of his intuitions are genius and way ahead of time. Most people today still don't have half a good grasp of influencing as Bernays had 100 years ago. I personally place propaganda at the same level as The Prince by Machiavelli, or whatever he's actually called, which is actually a book that I've been talking about in the last episode, because that was actually telling you about it. I actually wanted to go through it, but I'm not quite sure, because quite the content of the book is something that I do not quite would suggest, at least as I've understood it. It always in terms of, okay, did I actually understand it as it was meant to be understood, or did I get it wrong? There are quite a lot of factors, but maybe we'll have a look at it afterwards, or just in some day, to actually see, okay, will I give it to you? Won't I give it to you? Is this something that I'm just proud of producing, and whatsoever? Because this is important, because I do not quite want to give something to people or want to just provide something for people, even though it is provided, but not in audio version, not in my version, that is might actually harming them, or actually you. I do not want this. I do just want to have the best for the people, and want to just give them something that they can actually use, and or something that they can quite use in a good way, and use for just, moving the life in a more positive direction, and whatsoever. I also strongly agree with him that democracy presents severe limitations, and we need enlightened leaders who can do the interest of the masses. And that also means swaying the masses with intelligent communication and propaganda. This was actually quite it with this book. It's a little bit sad. I would say that it turned out not to be that good, because actually one of my teachers, my communication design teacher, was also talking about it in the lessons, and I quite thought I was quite interested in it from the first point on, because I felt propaganda is definitely something negative, so I think it is something negative, but how you're thinking about it, maybe you're primed differently. But really please tell me how you're just thinking of propaganda. Is it something that's negative, or is it something that's positive? For me, definitely it is something negative. I don't know. It's just because, a lot of bad leaders and a lot of dictators used it for their sake, probably, and not for the sake of humankind and whatsoever. So for me, it's definitely something negative. But I do think you can actually use propaganda in a good way as well. So there's always a bad and a good side. And, if you're just giving something good to the people, and if you're just kind of pursuing them to do something that is just creating a great place for all the people, and that's maybe just in general great for all the people, why wouldn't you? Maybe this is actually the thing that I'm doing right here. Maybe I'm just trying to do my propaganda. I actually think, even though it is quite a saying in German, I would say that if something is negative and people spread something just enormously, we quite think about propaganda. I don't know, I've heard it sometimes. But I do hope that you still got something out of it, even though it was something that was a little bit, uninteresting for me, but not quite uninteresting, but it didn't give me as much as I wanted it to give me in terms of the value, in terms of the information, and I think especially in terms of the tactics. I do just really enjoy when I'm having something that I can actually take action on, that is actually giving me practical advice, even though I have to say I also like theoretical stuff, because this just gives myself the, I don't know, not the possibility for sure, but also the must for me, that I actually have to just come up with, how is this meant? How can I implement it into my life? How is it like this, and would it work like that? And all these things. And I do just enjoy them as well. Totally not get me wrong. But yeah, actually the outro. I hope you got something out of it, and I do also hope that you enjoyed the episode. I wish you the best health, wealth, happiness, and success. And please do not forget about thinking your legacy and about giving back to the people, because these two things are, at my point of view, especially important for having a happy life, I would say. Especially giving back to the people and helping them. And yeah, but having a legacy and having just the thoughts of how you actually want to be remembered is also something that I would say is quite boosting your happiness and your will to have a great life as well. With that being said, I hope I will see you in the next episode, which is, I think, something great. And I'll see you the next episode actually today, because this is today's episode and whatsoever. I'll see you the next time.